there is an interval at which you need to change the coolant. Your service manual will tell you that. And basically that's just draining out the coolant that's in the radiator and then putting in new coolant. These small tractors do not have a coolant filter, I believe. A lot of larger, more expensive machinery will actually have coolant filters in them. But a lot of these kind of home, small scale tractors just totally avoid that service item. The other thing that you want to look at every time you're servicing is your air filter. Okay, so to get to the air filter, there's these clips here. And so they clip on like this. There's 3 of them. You can pull this whole top off, and you can see how much fine dust is in there. When you're tilling, this is where like a lot of dust is created. You know, if you haven't wet the field down, or if you're tilling in like the summertime when it's dry, you can't get it really wet enough that it's not going to make dust. And this thing's breathing, right? It's sucking air in. So any dust that's in the air that comes in the vicinity is going to try to go straight through that engine. And this is basically saving all of your engine life. This is the air filter, right? So this is just perforated paper. There's a lot of surface area because it's all folded in there. And it's catching all these fine particles that if these were to go into your engine, now all of a sudden you have like stones rubbing on metal, and there's a lot like tight tolerances in there. You know, tight enough that they're like forcing oil through it so that it floats. Is like, yeah, like a lot of engineering goes into a diesel engine. So this is your like, if you were to run a tractor like this without air filter, and you were doing tilling and stuff, you'd probably have maybe 30 hours, 40 hours before the engine would be totally smoked. So always good if you're going to be looking at a tractor. If I ever go look at a used tractor, first thing I do is pull the air filter. You can tell if someone's been servicing it or not. And a good way to tell, you know, like when you look at this, you're like, oh, it still looks like an air filter. It's not chocked with stuff, you know. So a good comparison is you look at the inside. That's what it looked like when it was brand new, right? Or maybe even a little bit better, a little bit lighter color than that. And then you can look at that compared to the outside, right, to kind of get an idea of how much use this has on it. I'll usually spray these out with an air compressor, with just an air gun, but I always spray from the inside out, right, because I don't want to force any of these particles to get stuck into this fiber. And that's a pretty dusty experience for anyone that's done it. The other thing that we can do is we can tap this. Yeah. So, and we just kind of spin it while we tap it. This is the cheap man's like way of doing it. If I'm like out in the field and I'm doing service for some reason, or even if I've just been tilling a lot and I know I've been sucking in dust, before that stuff gets even more embedded in there, after I'm done, I'll come and pull the air filter and tap it out before all that stuff's already gotten really deep in there, right? So we've already removed, you know, quite a bit of stuff from there without even blowing it out. So these filters have an hour number. Everything has an hour number from the factory, and there's a list in the service manual. You have a service manual? You have an owner's manual. Oh, and that's got it's got the service in it.
Every 100 hours change it?
Yeah, so every 100 hours. Or, I mean, you know, if you know you've been tilling a lot, these are probably $50 if you buy them from, you know, from the dealership. I mean, you might be able to go online and find them cheaper. Yeah, you could probably do a shop back a little bit. Maybe like I would probably like tap it, shop back it. You know, you're gonna get your money's worth replacing air filters. I always replace them more often than they're asked to do. So we can pass. I would say I most time go by the color and I go by how much stuff's coming out. Right? If I were to go in here and I tap it and like half that stuff comes out. Like this filter is okay for now, but I would know that I need to replace it in the next month, you know,
So
depending on how much.
Like halfway.
Yeah, I'd say like half to 3/4 way kind of thing. You'll generate extra heat if this thing isn't breathing because the engine doesn't have enough air for the amount of fuel it's burning. Yeah, I'd say about halfway, and you'll get an eye for it the more you see. You know, it's always weird, but sometimes I always look at people's, you know, like, oh, what's going on? You know, you have a leak here. You know, it's always. The other big thing about this is putting it back in and installing it. So there's this rubber O-ring inside here. Okay, that needs to sit completely over there. If you get it cocked at an angle, basically this thing is not going to do what it's trying to do. Okay, and you'll notice that everything should fit on, and it should, you know, be tight, but you shouldn't have to force anything. If you have to force anything, stop, come back, redo it, check, see if something's cockeyed or something's, you know, not moving around. But, you know, these are engineered to just slip on here, you know, and they sit almost like that just with their own weight, okay? And then this comes on and it actually forces that filter onto the backstop. So you also want to check, this is the only air inlet for this unit, so you want to check to make sure that's open. And if you don't have, you know, I've had wasp nests grow in there, you know, you get, you know, tractor sits for a long time, over winter, sometimes you get rats getting in there, or mice. Yeah, all kinds of.
That already happened.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, and then you just want to make sure all of your clips are clipped on there correctly.
So if we're gonna get new, like another filter, is the best thing to do call the dealership or look in the book and get the serial number and just order it online?
Good question. Okay, so yes, you can go to the dealership. They will sell you the exact product designed for this by them for their price, which most of the time is a lot, because they know, yeah, they know. So the other thing is you can take, all filters will have a number on them. Hopefully yours is still new enough that you can read the number. If you can't read the number, most of the time you could bring a filter like this to Napa, and they can measure it, and they can get you Napa, O'Reilly's. Everyone sells filters from different companies. They're considerably cheaper. They're like called aftermarket parts. But are they better in quality? Some of them probably. Which ones? Totally depends on what vehicle you're working on, what filter it is, what country they decided to have it made in this month. You know, so it's kind of a toss-up. Whereas if you go with the factory filter, it's like guaranteed to be this. And especially if you have a warranty on your machine, you're going to want to use their equipment, because if something fails, and they're going to look for any way out of that, right? So if they say, oh, you used a Napa filter, that's not covered. Now you've voided your whole warranty on the machine, you know. So if I own the equipment, I just go to Napa, get the Napa brand. If they have two options, most of the time I'll buy the more expensive one. Most of the time it's not more than 10% more. But what you can do is you can either bring them the filter, or you can bring them this number. This one is P822768, and they'll be able to cross-reference it. They'll be able to type it in the computer, and they'll say, oh yeah, we got one of these, $25.